Hi folks, welcome to Crisco's Corner. Are you tired of the same old blah, 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 blah from the media? Do you like unfiltered commentary? Would you like to go back to the days when our rights meant something? Well, you've come to the right place, Crisco's Corner. The fight to get back the ideals of our founders will be long and hard. Please support the channel by subscribing. And as always, thank you for your support. Hi folks, welcome back to Crisco's Corner. Hope he comes through. Trump's puts pressure on Pence after Jenna Ellis urges VP defer certifying electoral votes. Jenna Ellis is the attorney for the president. And of course, hope he pulls through. Trump is referring to Vice President Mike Pence. When Vice President Mike Pence signed on to be President Trump's number 2 guy, he could never have imagined all that would entail, but the most difficult task he will face in that role still lies ahead. On Wednesday, when Congress convenes to certify the Electoral College results, all eyes will be on Pence, and Trump's campaign attorney, Jenna Ellis, explained she believes he should do in response to many of the concerns about voter fraud and other irregularities in the 2020 election. It's a mess. It's a plain old mess. As president of the Senate, Pence is empowered by the 12th Amendment to preside over Congress as it accepts electoral college results and declares Joe Biden the winner. But Ellis said in an interview Monday night with Just the News that the vice president can defer certifying the election results under the argument that he can reject Biden-Harris electoral votes from 6 states. This was the basis of the lawsuit by Representative Louis Gohmert of Texas that was recently rejected by a federal judge. Instead, Pence would direct the matter of the respective state legislatures, according to the attorney. And I'll tell you the truth, honestly. I think that the Supreme Court and all of these states in questions, Supreme Court is derelict in duty, period. They should have heard the case from Texas, decided on the merits. Evidence would have been presented. So it would have taken 2 or 3 days. So what? This is hugely important. And the legislatures always are spineless, like most elected people are, but especially these people, because they didn't want to rock the boat. They just wanted to raise hell about it and do nothing. The Republicans especially, in these legislative states. They should have convened. Now, some of the governors wouldn't allow them to convene. This would be interesting because if you say Vice President Pence does this, and it goes back to the 6 states that are in question, remember, they only need to take away 37 electoral votes from Joe Biden, which would give him 269. He'll be short. I do my math correctly. Doesn't mean Trump will win. It just means we'll go to the House. Now say Pence does this and says these states their legislature needs to go over this and then pick electors. And some of the governors won't do it, either be Republican or Democrat, and they say, I'm not calling a session of our legislature. What do you do then? You don't count the electors for that state. That's the only way to do it. It'll be a mess. It'll be drama. But, hey, this was brought on by the fact of all the mail-in ballots and all the absentees and the tens of millions of unsolicited absentee ballots and ballots as well. The Democrats did, and brilliantly, I might add, a brilliant strategy on their part. Brilliant strategy. Now, are they responsible for the FRAUD? Who's to say? When I say they, I mean the DNC, the big shots in the Democrat Party in the United States. Or was it local? Was it big cities in these swing states? Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and other swing states. Was it? Detroit, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia are the 3 biggest standouts for this. with dumps with 98, 99% Biden votes in them. And it's just a lot of irregularities, which I won't go into. And there's hundreds and hundreds of written affidavits, swore under oath under penalty of perjury about some things that weren't just quite right. Now, would that be enough to swing the totals? Who's to say? But the people, the Trump supporters, and the president didn't have their day in court with the Supreme Court. They babied out. Put it back on the legislatures. These jobs are really easy until it gets tough. Well, you know what? That's why they pay you guys the big bucks. That's why you're appointed for life from the Supreme Court, to make the hard decision. And those of you out there to say, no, they shouldn't have done that. It's ridiculous. You're an ass, John. You're a Trump guy and blah, blah, blah. No, not at all. Not at all. They should have been heard. And this, the only way to be heard now is with the big march on Washington and this nonsense now that might potentially go on. They should have got their day in court, and they didn't. Maybe this is the way to make the Supreme Court rule. It's interesting, to be sure. What Mike Pence could do, and what he should do, in fact, is to direct the question back to the state legislatures. When there are two competing slates of delegates from these 6 states, Ellis said he can ask that question of the states and say, well, state legislatures, I have an oath to the Constitution to uphold the Constitution as written in Article 2, Section 1.2, which says the state legislatures direct the manner in which electoral delegates are selected. In these battleground states, Republicans put up their own sets of electors for Trump through the counter-argument that these electors are not official. So you tell me which one of these 2 slates are selected in the manner that your state General Assembly has designated, she continued. It's a fair argument. And as she said, that's a fair question. That's not exercising discretion. That's not setting up any sort of bad precedent. That's actually returning the authority to the constitutionally vested entity, and just simply direct that question, I think, would then require a response from those very timid, to put it lightly, state legislatures that haven't been willing to act. Whether you like her or not, and whether you like Trump or not, you can't argue with that paragraph. It's a legitimate point. Will it go anywhere? Who knows? Probably not. But the point is still valid nonetheless. And it would, in fact, then give a very clear outcome to this election, Ellis continued. It wouldn't be political. It would just be saying, you are the constitutionally invested authority. You tell me. I don't think that's so crazy. It's not. As if there isn't enough pressure on Mike Pence already, President Trump cranked up the intensity even more during a rally in Georgia Monday night, campaigning on behalf of the Republican incumbents in that state's Senate runoff elections. Trump said he is counting on Pence to come through for us. The president quipped that he would not like Mike as much if he does it, which the media spun as not so veiled threat to his own vice president. It's not a threat. What's he going to do? Not send him a Christmas card next year? Come on, give me a break. But those of you that are scoffing at all of this, let me show you one thing. We'll go to Wikipedia. Not exactly the greatest source in the world anymore since they've gotten taken over by progressives, but they get a lot of things right. This is something that happened in 1960, and it was John Kennedy, Richard Nixon. Now, when I was a young boy, I loved John Kennedy. I was born in 56. I used to have a little bust of his head on my desk when I was a little boy, and I had his picture, the presidential picture, the official one, hanging on the wall in my house, or my bedroom. And I loved John Kennedy, and he was my idol, and I was really young. When he died, I just turned 7 the week before. My birthday's on the 16th of November, and I believe he was shot and killed on the 22nd or 23rd. I can't remember. And I remember my mother telling me, I don't remember, that I was all upset because I said it ruined my birthday from the week before. And I thought the world of him. I'm just a young boy. That was my idol, But that's besides the point. The 1960 United States presidential election in Hawaii. The 1960 presidential election in Hawaii was held on November 8th. Just like everybody else in the United States, that was Election Day. And as part of the 1960 United States presidential election, this was the first presidential election which Hawaii participated. Sure, because 4 years prior to that, they weren't a state. Oh, boy, I feel old now. I'm old enough to be alive when there were less states than there are now. The state had been admitted to the Union just over a year earlier. The island's favored Democrat John Kennedy by the narrowest of margins. 115 votes, or 0.06. The state voted more Republicans than the national average for the last time until it did the same again by less than a percentage point in a two-party vote share in 1972. And now here's the part that I want you to pay attention to. Initially, it appeared Republican candidate Richard Nixon had won in the state, as he was 141 votes ahead after the first count. A court-ordered recount was still underway. Now, this is the important part now. The recount was still underway when Hawaii's Republican governor signed the certificate from the GOP electors giving the state's 3 electoral votes to Nixon. Okay, the governor signs it. He sends it on its way. How they sent it to Washington, I'm assuming they sent it on a special plane or had somebody bring it because it's important. On the same day as that was sent, the Democrat electors also issued a certificate awarding the votes to Kennedy. Sound familiar? The final recount showed Kennedy had actually prevailed by 114 votes, forcing the governor to sign the second certificate from the Democrat electors. And this is the important part. Although there is no evidence the governor actually signed the second certificate, they can't find the certificate with his signature on it. I don't think he signed it, and neither do a lot of historical people a lot smarter than I. Both certificates had arrived in Washington by the time Congress convened in January of 1961. When then, remember, there we go, this is a similar circumstance. Vice President Richard Nixon, you remember he was vice president under Dwight Eisenhower. And in January 1961, when then Vice President Nixon charged with presiding over a joint session to certify his own election loss. Very similar to what happened to Al Gore. He had to certify his election loss, even though there were objections from the House and the Senate. And now they're saying the Republicans, this is ridiculous. And they did it all the time. And Al Gore, actually, I saw one of the clips, gavelled him out of order and says, you are out of order. You do not have a letter from any sitting U.S. senator. You need one person from each chamber, the House and the Senate, to have an objection. They had none. And they went through the whole list of people, blah, 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 and it was ridiculous. And Al Gore gavelled him out of order. And I remember him saying, no, you're out of order. He said, no, you're out of order. And Al Gore said, we have rules here, and gavelled them down. I gave Al Gore credit for that, to do that against your own presidency. But I digress. By the time Congress convened in January 1961, with then Vice President Nixon charged with presiding over a joint session to certify his own election loss, hearing no objections, Nixon ordered the Democrat certificate counted and ignored the accompanying Republican certificate, even though it had bore the governor's signature as required by federal law. Now, those of you out there that are saying, well, it didn't matter, Kennedy would have won anyway, so who cares? No, this is precedent. Lawyers and judges love precedent, believe me, especially when it's exactly the same thing. But they won't swing the election in this case, but the premise is exactly the same. Richard Nixon counted the Democrat electors without the governor's signature or the approval of that state's legislature, and nobody objected. And it went through, and the rest is history. Now, as you can see from the right there, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered that they don't have the full electoral college there. It's just Hawaii, but it wouldn't have mattered in electoral college because Kennedy had a ton of electoral votes, even though it was very close in the popular vote. But this is the precedent. This is the precedent that Richard Nixon took it upon himself as vice president and president of the Senate to use the electors for the Democrats without the signature of the governor of that state or its legislature. And no one objected because, of course, they knew there was a recount, but that's besides the point. Very, very, very interesting. Now, the president said, I hope Mike Pence comes through for us. I have to tell you that I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy, of course, but if he doesn't come through, I won't like him as much. And, they probably chuckled. The 12th Amendment narrowly defines the vice president's role as to, and I quote, open all the certificates and the votes shall then be counted. Now, if you even add a little more twist to it, the Electoral Count Act of 1887 further states the vice president has the authority to introduce electors alphabetically by state and can call for objections. This is the quote from the law. Call for objections when electoral votes are announced and to state the results of those objections after the House and Senate meet separately to consider them, the National Constitutional Center noted. But there's plenty of ambiguity here, of course. Pence did not support Gobert's lawsuit, but his chief of staff, Mark Short, said the vice president welcomes the efforts of lawmakers to use the authority they have under the law to raise objections and bring forward evidence. Speaking in a rally in Georgia last week, Pence said he would allow objections to the certified results to be heard. I promise you, come this Wednesday, we'll all have our day in Congress. We'll hear the objections, we'll hear the evidence, Pence said, according to the newspaper. I think that's an honorable thing for him to say, and it'll be an honorable thing for him to do, whether you like Trump or not. You have to take Trump out of the equation. We are talking about the free and fair elections of the most powerful, richest republic/democracy in the world. This is not some third world country bullshit. And a lot of crap went on. And maybe someday some of it will come out. Who knows? Maybe a lot of it won't, I'm sure. That's not the point. And if these state legislatures, if Vice President Pence does this, if he does this and say these 6 states, or whatever the states that he picks, I will not count any electors. I won't count the electors that the Republicans sent in from their legislatures, and I won't count the Democrats that the governor signed off on without legislative approval in their state. They get none until they get their crap together and decide which way they're going to go. I think that's very, very interesting. Very interesting indeed. To allow the delay in the counting of the electors to get the state's legislatures, which is they're bound constitutionally to do by their state constitution and the U.S. Constitution, they're bound to do their effing job. Sometimes it's going to be tough, as most politicians want to go along and they don't want to make anybody mad. Well, too bad. This is an historic moment, and there's precedent. Some will say, well, it didn't change the outcome of the 1960 election. It doesn't matter. This is all because the Supreme Court was derelict in their duty. I can't even tell you how disappointed I am. And I know Judge Alito and Judge Thomas wanted to hear it. That's the stories I've been reading. And there's also rumors, and I use air quotes and rumors, that some of the law clerks could hear him screaming in the chamber where the justices met to discuss whether to take the case or not. They chose the cowardly way out. I'm sorry they did. Yes, there would have been rioting. Yes, there would have been threats. Yes, there would have been security put around their family and their house. Yes, for the next 2 or 3 years, their life would have been a nightmare. Tough shit. You took that oath. You put that robe on. Now you are the law. You are the supreme law in the land. And you were derelict in your duty, so now all this has to be talked about. It's like you said, you'll get your day in Congress. Well, they wanted their day in court. And those of you that hate Donald Trump's guts, take your personal animosity aside. We're talking about the future of the republic. If this can be thrown aside like it's nothing, then what else can happen in the future to turn our republic into a banana republic? And they say Trump's doing that. He is only doing what the law allows him to do. How can that be a banana republic in the laws that they made in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate? You might not like his tactics. You might not like his mouth. You might not like he's fighting right to the bitter end. Tough shit. The man's got it right. And I think the world of Mike Pence. I really do. He's a little too conservative on some things, but that's a different issue. That's some policy issues that we disagree on. But the vast majority of things he believes in, I believe in. But what I believe in, I believe he's an honorable man. And so, on his honor, does he do what's right? Sending it back to the states, I believe, is the right way to do it. Not take the electors from Biden. That's not... I have to be respectful. Former Vice President Biden, because I criticize other people for it, I got to do it myself. Do not take the electors away from former Vice President Biden, but send it back to the state legislatures and say, get your shit together and let us know. And if you can't decide, your state gets no electors. I think that is proper and with legal precedent. It's going to be interesting. I think there are going to be books written about this. I know legal geeks are just going crazy over this. They love it because it's so once in a century or maybe once in 2 centuries situation. This is history. And it's ugly sometimes and it's messy. But we're going to see what happens. And until next time, folks, goodbye. And good luck.